Hello everyone, welcome to International Trade Session. You're with me, Fredman John. In this session, we're going to focus on the Incoterms. These are the terms of sale that are used for the practice of international trade all over the world. But before we move even further, first I would like to take you through some key definitions regarding international trade. Number one, the meaning of international trade. International trade simply means the movement of goods, services, and funds across international borders. By saying so, it implies that international trade involves the two key aspects, that is, the import and exports. And last one, the movement of funds. Export simply means producing goods or services domestically and sell them abroad. So to sell them abroad, it means you are exporting, and this is done by the seller or an exporter. On the other hand, we have import. Import simply means purchasing goods and services from abroad and bringing them into the country. For example, if Canada purchases produced goods and services from China, that is known as the import. So import or importation is done by the buyer. So in international trade, we do expect these two key participants of the international trade, that is the seller and the buyer, or importer and exporter, to enter into a trade agreement of buying or selling goods or services for money. So, where do we place banks, or where do banks stand in all this? Banks are not part and parcel of the international trade. Rather, banks are there to facilitate the smooth running of international trade. To be able to achieve this object, banks provide a number of bank services to the participants of international trade. The services so provided by the banks are such as financing facilities, for example, different loans can be short-term or long-term, overdraft, credit guarantee, export guarantee schemes, etc. Provision of information, safekeeping of money and other valuables, payments and fund transfer, and many more services. This session focuses on the distribution of responsibilities whenever a particular buyer or a particular seller wants to import or export goods. Now, let's continue. International commercial terms, commonly known as INCOTERMS, were first published by the International Chamber of Commerce, abbreviated as ICC, back in 1936. The international commercial terms, since their inception into the practice of international trade, has assisted into resolving a number of disputes which prior to their inception were kind of difficult to be resolved. International commercial terms of trade, or Incoterms, are alternatively known as trade terms or the terms of sale. It is of paramount importance to establish the cutoff point where the responsibilities of the seller and exporter end and where the responsibilities of the buyer or importer begins. So the Incoterms, or every single Incoterms, are supposed to put a clear demarcation between the responsibilities of these two participants of the international trade. So I can conclude by saying that the purpose of Incoterm is therefore to establish a set of standardized terms of carriage contracts, which means exactly the same to all parties and will be interpreted in exactly the same way by courts in any given country. So we do not expect for any dispute to occur. However, if it happens that there will be any dispute between these two key participants of international trade, buyer and seller, then we need, wherever this case will be taken, a court in that particular location or country will be able to interpret it the very same way ICC intends for the Incoterms to be interpreted. So back then we had the INCOTERMS Rule 2000. However, as we speak, now we have INCOTERMS Rules 2010 and contract to INCOTERMS Rules 2000, which had 13 INCOTERMS. The INCOTERMS Rule 2010 has a set of only 11 INCOTERMS. Every single INCOTERM must answer the following 3 key questions. Number 1, who must pay for transport? Number 2, who must bear the risk of loss or damage to the goods during the transport or when the goods are on transit? And number 3, who will be responsible to meet custom formalities in the country of export and import as well? So I insist here that every single INCOTERM needs to clearly define or provide an answer for these 3 key questions. Ladies and gentlemen, following the trade agreement, 2 contracts are going to be formed. That is, the contract of sale and the contract of carriage. Now let's start with the contract of sale. The contract of sale is an agreement between the seller, who happens to be the exporter, and the buyer or the importer. In this contract, we expect the following issues to be clearly stipulated. That is, an INCOTERM rule to be used, price of the consignment, date of delivery, documents to be produced, plus any other issues as per the contract. Some other issues can be such as the method of payment and the terms of payment. Next is the contract of carriage. Now the contract of carriage is an agreement between the shipping company and the exporter on behalf of the importer or the importer himself. Of the 11 INCOTERMs, not all INCOTERMs will require the presence of the importer during the signing of the contract of carriage. That is to say, there are some other INCOTERMs that will allow the exporter to act on behalf of the importer. That is to say now, if the INCOTERM requires the importer to be the one to charter the carriage vessel, then it is the importer who will be responsible to sign the contract of carriage. However, if the INCOTERM requires the exporter to charter the shipping vessel, then there's no need for an importer to be there. Rather, the exporter will sign the contract of carriage on behalf of the importer. So, according to the INCOTERM Rules 2000, it used to have 13 INCOTERMs. However, since the inception of the INCOTERM Rules 2010, 2 INCOTERMs were introduced and 4 INCOTERMs from the INCOTERM Rule 2000 were dropped. So the new introduced INCOTERMs are delivered at terminal and delivered at press. And the INCOTERMs that have been dropped are delivered at frontier, delivered ex-ship, delivered ex-key, and delivery duty unpaid. These 4 INCOTERMs were there during the use of INCOTERMS Rule 2000. However, right now, as we speak, they are no longer functioning. So now let's focus our discussion on the 11 INCOTERMs according to the INCOTERMS Rule 2010. The first INCOTERM is known as the XWEX, abbreviated as EXW. Second, Free Carrier, abbreviated as FCA. Third, Carriage Paid To, abbreviated as CPT. Fourth, Carriage and Insurance Paid To, abbreviated as CIP. Fifth, Delivered at Terminal, abbreviated as DAT. Sixth, Delivered at Press, abbreviated as DAP. Seventh, Delivery Duty Paid, abbreviated as DP. Eighth, Free Alongside, abbreviated as FAS. Ninth, Free On Board, abbreviated as FOB. 10th, Cost and Freight, abbreviated as CFR or CF. And the last one is Cost Insurance and Freight, abbreviated as CIF. Now, I'm going to need you to focus your attention on the words in parentheses. Look at the Incoterm XX or free carrier. The word in parentheses reads named place of delivery for both of them. Again, focus your attention on the Incoterms CPT, CIP, CFR, and CIF. The word in parentheses reads named place of destination, and as for these two, named port of destination. So, what is the meaning of this? Named place of delivery refers to the location or the point where the seller will deliver the consignment to the buyer. That is the meaning of the named place of delivery. However, named place of destination refers to the location, usually at the country of import, where the seller will deliver the consignment to the buyer. Again, the named port of destination still means the same thing as the named place of destination. However, you see here it reads named port of destination, meaning that this Incoterm, with this Incoterm, the seller is supposed to deliver the consignments to the port of destination, which is located in the country of import. But I want you to focus your attention again on these two Incoterms, free alongside and the free on board. Now with these two Incoterms, the words in parentheses reads named port of shipment for both of them. So what is the meaning of this? Named port of shipment, it means that the seller is required to deliver the ready for export consignments at the port that will be nominated by the buyer, and this port is in the country of export, not in the country of import. So named port of shipment, the port here is located in the country of export, while the named port of destination, the port named here is located in the country of import. Last, focus your attention on the Incoterm DAT, named terminal at port or place of destination. So this Incoterm requires the seller to deliver the consignment at the named terminal or port which is located in the country of destination. Now, again, I should mention to you that the 11 Incoterms are grouped into two categories, that is, multimodal Incoterms and marine Incoterms. The multimodal Incoterms, also known as the general or containerized Incoterms, refer to all those Incoterms that can be used for a combination or different modes of transport. So, the Incoterms falling under these groups are such as XX, free carrier, carriage paid to, carriage insurance paid to, delivered at terminal, delivered at port, and delivered duty paid. The second group is the marine Incoterm. Marine Incoterm here, it refers to all those Incoterms that are designated to be used for marine transport. So here we have only 4 Incoterms, namely free alongside, free on board, costs and freight, and the last one is cost, insurance, and freight. So as I've mentioned earlier, these 4 Incoterms are designated only for the marine transport. So in conclusion, I can say that of the 11 Incoterms presented by the INCOTERMS Rule 2010, the 7 Incoterms are meant for containerized or multimodal transport, while the 4 Incoterms are designated only for the marine transport. However, in normal practice of the international trade, the commonly used Incoterms are the XX, free alongside, free on board, cost and freight, and last one, costs, insurance, and freight. So even though there are 11 Incoterms, but these 5 are the most commonly used Incoterms in the practice of international trade all over the world. So let's dwell now into every and each Incoterm presented, starting with the Ex-Works. Now, Ex-Works is the Incoterm that places maximum responsibilities over the shoulder of the seller of the buyer, while providing minimum responsibilities over the shoulder of the seller. That is to say, under the Incoterm Ex-Works, the seller will have the least responsibilities, while the buyer will have a number of responsibilities to be fulfilled. So in another way around, I can conclude by saying that Ex-Works will be very cheap Incoterm in the buyer's perspective. However, the buyer should comprehend that he will have a number of responsibilities to fulfill. So under the Ex-Works, the seller's primary duties are such as to ensure that the procured goods are ready for delivery at the named place of delivery. And number 2, to deliver the goods at the premises or at the location where he has promised the buyer to come over for the collection. However, I should mention that under this Incoterm, at the request of the buyer, either for free or at a fee, the seller can assist the buyer to acquire export license. Otherwise, the buyer can do that himself. So that is to say, with these Incoterms, the seller will have only 2 responsibilities. That is to ensure that the procured goods are available and they are ready to be delivered at the agreed location. So the delivery point will be right here at the premises of the seller and not anywhere else. And that is to say, now the moment the buyer has received the consignment right here at the warehouse of the seller, risk will automatically be transferred from the seller to the buyer. Now let's see the responsibilities of the buyer under this Incoterm. Number 1, the buyer is supposed to pay for the goods. Number 2, the buyer is supposed to go over to the premises of the seller and collect the goods. Afterwards, he'll have to arrange for carriage and contract a freight. It can be a lorry or a shipping company to transport the goods from the country of export to the country of import. Then, the buyer is supposed to obtain the export clearance. Remember, without the export license, the buyer won't be allowed to ship goods from the country of export. After that, the buyer is supposed to pay for insurance of those goods, because anything can happen while the goods are underway. Now, after obtaining the insurance and obtain the export clearance, the goods will be transported to the country of destination. Now, at the country of destination, the buyer is supposed to clear the goods for import. That is, to meet all custom formalities in the country of import. Also, he is supposed to pay for loading and offloading charges if they are not covered under the freight cost that he paid earlier. So, with this, the buyer will be done. The Incoterm free carrier provides the following responsibilities to the seller. Number 1, the seller will be responsible to procure the goods as contracted or as he has promised the buyer. Number 2, to ensure that the procured goods are delivered into the custody of the carrier. However, this carrier will be named or nominated by the buyer. So that's to say that this Incoterm requires the seller not to pay for freight, because this will be done by the buyer, who will also nominate this particular carrier to the seller. Again, before delivering the goods to the buyer, then the seller will be required to meet all custom formalities in the country of export. That is to say, he needs to obtain export clearance and pay any export duties as required by the law in that particular country. Afterwards, the seller will be required to send all documents that evidence that the delivery of goods has been done to the carrier. So these documents need to be sent to the buyer. On the other hand, free carrier provides the following responsibilities to the buyer. That is, the buyer is required to pay for the price of goods as invoiced by the seller. Second, he needs to nominate the carrier. And remember, by nominating the carrier, it means the buyer is responsible to enter into the contract of carriage with the carrier. That is, he needs to pay for the freight. Again, he is going to have to pay for insurance, and once the goods have been exported, then in the country of import, the buyer will be required to obtain the import clearance. That is, in short, I can say, to meet all custom formalities in the country of import, and ensure that goods reach out to his warehouse. That is, to arrange for carriage in the country of import, so goods are transported from the port or the place where he has collected the goods into his warehouse. The third Incoterm is known as the Carriage Paid To, abbreviated as CPT. Now, under this Incoterm, here are seller's primary duties. Number 1, to contract for the carriage and pay for the freight to the named place of destination. So you see here now, this Incoterm, remember the words in parentheses, named place of destination. That is to say, this Incoterm requires the seller to ensure that goods are delivered at the named place of destination, which is located in the country of import. So once the goods have been collected, then the seller is supposed to arrange for carriage of goods from his warehouse to the transporting point, and over there he will hand over the goods to the chartered freight or to the chartered carrier, who will be responsible to ensure that the goods are transported from the country of export to the country of import. So once the goods has been delivered to the carrier, then the seller is supposed to meet all custom formalities in the country of export. That is, to ensure that he has paid all necessary fees such as export duties and the required taxes. At the end of this, the seller will complete his task, thereby ensure that all documents that were supposed to be produced as per the agreement in the contract of sale has been sent or delivered to the buyer. So on the other side, the buyer had the following responsibility. Number 1, to pay for the price of the goods as invoiced by the seller. Number 2, to accept or to collect the goods once they have been delivered in the country of destination. 3, to ensure that the goods are insured. That is, he will be responsible to pay for insurance. The insurance is meant to cover or to provide cover once the goods are underway or once the goods are transported from the country of export to the country of import. And last, once the goods have been delivered into his country, he will be responsible to receive them, meet all custom formalities in the country of import, and last, to ensure that he arranges for carriage of goods from the collection point into his warehouse. Then they have another Incoterm, and that is CIP, Carriage and Insurance Paid To. This Incoterm is not that much different from the previous Incoterm CPT, Carriage Paid To. So responsibilities of these two parties remain the same. However, there will be a slight change, and that is, under the Incoterm CIP, Carriage and Insurance Paid To, the buyer, besides all those duties that he has completed under the CPT, in this, you will be required to pay for insurance. Remember, under the Incoterm CPT, insurance was paid by the buyer, but in this Incoterm CIP, insurance will be paid by the seller. That is to say, now the duties of the buyer will be only to pay for the goods as invoiced, and then collect the goods in the country of destination or the country of import, and afterwards meet custom formalities in the country of import, and arrange for carriage in the country of import for the goods from the delivery point to its warehouse. The next Incoterm is delivered at terminal, abbreviated as DAT. These Incoterms require the seller to pay for transport to a specified terminal at the agreed destination. That is to say, the seller in these Incoterms is responsible to ensure that he has arranged for carriage of goods from his warehouse to the point of transport or to the carrier, and also he needs to ensure that he has met all custom formalities in the country of export before he could deliver the consignment or these goods to the terminal where the carrier would transport them to the agreed point, which is in the country of destination. Now, on the other side, the buyer will have the following responsibility, that is to ensure that he has duly paid all costs of importing the goods, meet custom formalities in the country of import, and arrange for carriage of goods from the collection point to his warehouse. The next is delivered at place, or DAP. Now, the delivered at place, or DAP, requires the sellers to ensure that he pays for transport of goods from the country of export to the country of import to the destination. Next, he must meet all custom formalities in the country of export. So, when it comes to the issue of insurance, the seller has no any obligation unless he has been asked to do so by the buyer. So, once the goods have been shipped to the country of destination, then the buyer's responsibility kicks in, and that is, the buyer is required to pay for cost of importing those goods and obtain insurance of goods, as well as ensuring that the goods are cleared at the country of import, and he arrange for the transport of goods from the collection point to his warehouse. The next Incoterm in this list is the Delivery Duty Paid, or DDP. Ladies and gentlemen, DDP is the Incoterm that provides maximum responsibilities over the seller while providing too few responsibility over the buyer. Just to let you know, DDP is the opposite of XWorks. Remember, under the XWorks, the buyer has a number of responsibilities to fulfill, while the seller was required only to ensure that the goods are available and ready for collection at the named place of delivery. So with the DDP is opposite. Since this Incoterm requires the buyer to inform or to notify the seller only the location, the address where the seller is supposed to come over and deliver the goods, and this location will be in the country of import. However, the seller now will be required to fulfill a number of responsibilities starting from his country and the rest of the responsibilities in the country of import. So in the country of export, the seller's responsibilities are such as to ensure that the procured goods are ready for shipment. Second, to arrange for carriage of goods from his warehouse to the point of shipping or to the carrier. Number 3, to meet all custom formalities in the country of export. pay for insurance, pay for freight, and pay for loading fees. Once the goods has been transported and reached to the country of destination, then the seller will continue by ensuring that the transported goods are cleared. That is, he needs to meet all custom formalities in the country of export, and afterwards arrange for carriage of goods from the port or the point where he has collected the goods, and deliver them to the address that was nominated by the buyer. So you can see now this Incoterm, the delivery point of goods is at an address that has been named by the buyer. And in this picture here, this point is where the risk will be transferred from the seller to the buyer. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus of our discussion is now on the Incoterms that are designated for marine transport only. That is, we are done with the Incoterms that are used for multimodal transport, and so we are on to marine. Now, the first Incoterm is the free alongside ship, or FAS. Now, this is a marine Incoterm that requires the seller to ensure that the ready for export goods are delivered at the named carrier or the named ship, which is located at the named port of shipment, and the named port of shipment is in the country of export. So that is to say that once the procured goods are ready, then the seller is required to ensure that these goods are carried to the named port of destination, and the named port of destination will be named by the respective buyer. So once the goods are over there, then the seller is supposed to ensure that he has met all custom formalities in the country of export before he could deliver these goods to the carrying vessel. Now on this sketch here, you can see that, suppose that this is the port, the seller is required to deliver the goods alongside the ship, not on board the ship, alongside the ship. And it is at this point where risk will be transferred from the seller to the buyer. So remember, the named port of shipment is located in the seller's country, in the country of export, and the goods are supposed to be delivered alongside the ship, not on board a ship. So the responsibilities of the buyer will be to pay for the price of the goods and insurance as invoiced, to nominate the carrier and advise the seller. So he has to notify the seller the names of the shipping company so that it could be easy for the seller to arrange for carriage from his warehouse to the named port of shipment, where the carrier will be waiting for the consignment ready to be transported from the country of export to the country of import. Again, the buyer will have the responsibility to pay for freight. That is to say, he's going to have to enter into the contract of carriage, and once the goods have arrived into the country of import, then the buyer will be responsible to meet custom formalities in the country of import. So custom formalities there, it means to pay for the import duties or any other duties as required by the law in that particular country. Last, he's going to have to arrange for the carriage of goods from the port to his warehouse in the country of import, and that will be the destination. The next Incoterm under the marine Incoterms, or the Incoterm that fall under marine transport, is the free on board, abbreviated as FOB. Now, remember all responsibilities of the seller under the Incoterm FAS, free alongside. Now, under the free alongside, the seller was required to deliver the goods alongside the ship. That is right here on this particular point in the named port of shipment that is located in the country export. Now, this Incoterm FOB requires the seller not to deliver the consignment or the cargo alongside the ship, rather on board the ship. And again, I should remind you that just like under the Incoterm FAS, again, even in this Incoterm, the buyer is the one who will be responsible to charter for the ship and notify or give this information to the seller. So the information will assist the seller to arrange for the proper carriage of the consignment from his warehouse to the ship at the named port of shipment. Again, I should remind you that with this Incoterm, risk will be transferred from the seller to the buyer when the ships are delivered on board the vessel, not outside on board the vessel. Afterwards, responsibilities of the buyer will start, and that is, the buyer is required to pay for the price of the goods as invoiced. Then, once the goods have reached out into his country, then he's supposed to meet custom formalities in the country of import, and last, arrange for carriage of the goods from the port to his warehouse. Another Incoterm falling under the category of marine transport is the cost and freight, abbreviated as the CFR. Under this Incoterm, the seller has a number of responsibilities to be fulfilled, such as, number 1, to ensure that the procured goods are ready for export. Number 2, to meet all custom formalities in the country of export. That means he needs to pay the necessary export duties and obtain the export license. Number 3, he needs to arrange for carriage of goods from his warehouse to the port, where the goods will be carried by a certain vessel and is shipped to the country of import or to the destination. Afterwards, the seller is supposed to charter the freight. That is, he needs to pay for freight and all other handling fees as will be required by the company that will be transporting those goods from the country of export to the country of import. So under this Incoterm, the seller is not responsible to pay for insurance. Once he is done, he's supposed to remit or to send the documents to the buyer, who will be waiting for them in the country of import. Now, once the goods have reached into the country of import, the buyer will have a number of responsibilities. But before then, he must have paid for the insurance if he really wants to provide cover for the transport goods, as this will not be done by the seller. So, beside those, then he's supposed to have paid for the goods as invoiced by the seller and be ready to accept the goods once they have reached into the port of destination. That is to say, now the buyer will be required to meet custom formalities in the country of import and last arrange for carriage of the goods from the port to his warehouse. The last Incoterm under this category is the cost, insurance and freight, abbreviated as CIF. Now, to comprehend the responsibilities of both the seller and the buyer under this Incoterm, I would like you to recall the responsibilities of these two parties under the Incoterm C and F, cost and freight. Remember, under the Incoterm cost and freight, it was the responsibility of the buyer to provide insurance or insurance cover from the country of export to that of import. However, in this Incoterm CIF, this responsibility shifts from the buyer to the seller. Therefore, it is the seller who will be responsible to provide an insurance cover through the entire trip, that is, from the country of export to that of import. Therefore, at the part of the buyer will be responsible only to pay for the goods as invoiced, then to meet custom formalities in the country of import. Afterwards, the buyer will be required to arrange for carriage of goods from the port to his warehouse. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of this brief presentation. Should you have any question regarding what we have covered so far, please do not hesitate to ask, and I'll do my best to reach out to you as soon as I can. I hope to see you in another sessions. Thank you for your time. Stay healthy and good day.